Hello, and welcome to the Narrowing Path, Walking the Spiritual Walk. My name's Stephen Van Eierstein, and welcome back for the second video episode of this podcast. And today we're going to be going over Chapter 2 from the book As A Man Thinketh by James Allen. This is the longest chapter in the book, by far, actually. And so I'm not sure how long this is going to take us, but might be pretty lengthy, but I'm going to try to really get to the meat of this and keep us on track with it. Thank you, everybody who jumped on and watched last week's video. If you didn't see it, go ahead and check it out. It was the first video podcast for this podcast. Actually, it was pretty awesome. I was very excited about it. Got a couple of views on it, which was always which is a joy. And I hope everyone that's listened has found some benefit in it. But if you haven't, if you're seeing this one first, please don't hesitate. Go ahead, check out the first one, which was the review of the Chapter 1 of James Allen, As A Man Thinketh. That was Thought and Character. Today's is going to be Chapter 2, Effect of Thought on Circumstances. This is one of the copies of the book that I have. And this is the one I read out of. And then I have another copy here that I'll be going through. And obviously I've got a note or two in it. Which is kind of what happens here. It makes it easier for me if I can just read along and mark up the book, but I don't want to do it in one of my antique copies. So I'll be reading out of this one today and just kind of going along with it. So I'm excited about all of this. This has been a great experience for me, and I hope it has been for y'all as well. So let's get into it. This is Chapter 2 of James Allen's book, As A Man Thinketh, Effect of Thought on Circumstance. So I really enjoyed this one because it helped change my thinking and restructure things in a way that took me out of being the victim of my circumstances a lot of times. I really thought that I was just the unfortunate victim of the world, and it was just unlucky. I really thought I was just an unlucky individual. Turns out I was wrong. It was all linked to how I was thinking and what I was thinking about and what my intentions were. So this chapter really was encouraging because it gave me put the power back into my hands, right? It gave me the ability to say, if I want to change the world out in front of me, if I want to change what's directly around me, I need to change myself. I need to go back and take a look at what I'm thinking about. What am I bringing into my life? What decisions am I actually making? Because it's not the big decisions, it's the small decisions you got to pay attention to, I've found out. The big decisions kind of handle themselves. It's the small decisions that lead you into a place where the larger decisions in life can actually be made. So he opens this one up again with a continuation almost of the first metaphor, where he's talking about the man's mind is like a garden, right? We were talking about that last week, and the things you get out of life, grief or happiness and joy or sadness and sorrow and negative circumstance, misery, resentment. What you get out of life is the fruit from your actions, which start with the seed of a thought, right? So the thought is the seed, actions are the tree, fruit is your consequences. So he goes into that again. I mean, the opening line of this chapter is, man's mind might be likened to a garden, which may be intelligently cultivated or allowed to run wild. This is the important line. But whether cultivated or neglected, it must and will bring forth. If no useful seeds are put into it, then an abundance of useless weed seeds will fall therein and will continue to produce their kind. Now, why is this important? Because it goes back to giving you the ability to have a little bit more say in where you are going in life, the direction you want to take. And this might sound obvious to many, but I didn't understand that what I was feeding myself was shaping what I was thinking about. And now what I was thinking about was then shaping my actions, which then shaped my circumstances. That's the chain of progression here, right? And what he's telling me here is I get to choose the seeds I'm planting. And because I get to do that, I get to choose what grows. And what grows gives me the fruit I'm looking for. So I have to be aware of this. And the garden of my mind will grow something. That's the guarantee. You will think about things. Now, what you want to think about is really up to you. What are you consuming on a daily basis? Who are you surrounding yourself with? What are the conversations you're having? What are you watching? What are you listening to? What are you reading? What are you choosing to place into your mind? Because there's always input going in. There's always information going into our bodies. There's always information going into our minds from one way or another. What are you choosing to put yourself around? And when you do that, you can change, or you have some impact on what you're thinking about, right? What type of music do you listen to? Like, that's the extent this goes to. It all matters. It really does. It all matters. And the more completely you accept that statement, the faster you can change your life. When you can fully and wholly accept the statement that everything matters, you become very much more aware and you care much more about what you're actually doing and the steps you're taking. All right? So, this seems, it seems pretty obvious when you articulate it, when you say it, and you are putting it all together. Like, of course this is going to impact me, but we don't realize, like, it matters in every capacity. You can want to be this type of person, a disciplined person. You could want to be someone that likes volunteering. You could want to do all these things, but if you're listening to this stuff that's just solely selfish, that's solely about your own pleasure, your own anger, your own resentment, frustrations, insecurities, fears, that's what you're putting into the garden of your mind, or that's what you're letting be planted there, right? So not only do we have to weed the garden of our mind, meaning choosing the thoughts we tend to grab onto and nurture, we also have to be intentional with the things you're putting into your mind. Be intentional with the seeds you are planting in the garden of your mind, because those will shape your circumstances, your destiny, your character. It all has this impact on you. And we're only on paragraph 1, guys. Sorry about this. 10 minutes in. It might be longer than expected. But and this is a process too. You can't just listen to me and read this book and then suddenly you're changing every single thought in your mind. It as beautiful as I would like that to be, it's not how it goes. You're going to keep finding it in different areas. You're going to find certain people that you can't be around, or certain people that you want to be around more, depending on the information they're giving you, depending on the perspective that they're having, depending on the love really that they have in their heart. And then you get to make these choices. You get to choose what you bring into your life. The music, the news, the people, the books, the information. It's all a choice you get to have. And all of those things will play a part in developing your character and your circumstance. So it's very, very important to see these things. And the thing I'm going to jump to next is a couple paragraphs down. It starts the paragraph with thought and character are one, which is what we talked about in chapter 1. And as character can only manifest and discover itself through environment and circumstances, very important, the outer conditions of a person's life will always be found to be harmoniously related to his inner state. Now, what does that mean? That sounds important. Well, yeah, because it is. It's extremely important. It means if you stop and you take a look around yourself, if you look around your life, what are your relationships like? What is your living situation like? What is your job like? How is your relationship with your significant other? Do you have a significant other? Okay. Your circumstances are in direct relation to your thoughts. Okay? The outer conditions of a person's life will always be found to be harmoniously related to his inner state. Now, as character can only manifest and discover itself through environment and circumstance too. So, if you're having a hard time wondering, or if you're having a hard time figuring out or wondering how to figure out what you're thinking about, take an honest look at your circumstances and your situation. Because that will reveal your character and your thoughts to yourself. You'll be able to take an honest assessment of these things. Right? Are things the way you want them? Do you seem to date the same person over and over again with different names? If you do, you'll know what I'm saying. Right? Are you always struggling for money? Are you always miserable with your job? Are you always going from job to job, trying to find one that fits you, and all these jobs are terrible? Well, you might be the problem. I was the problem. I like to blame everything else in my life, but the reality is my circumstances kept showing me that there was a problem with my thinking. There was a problem with what I was doing. There was a problem with how I was living. But I didn't want to acknowledge that. I wanted to blame the world, blame my bosses, blame my coworkers, blame the type of work that I was doing, which I chose every time. That's the beautiful part about this, is I chose it all. But take a look at your circumstances, and he says in the bottom of that paragraph, but that those circumstances are this does not mean that a man's circumstances at any given time are an indication of his entire character. Let's say you're in a certain situation and you've recognized that it's your responsibility and you're changing that, right? But you're still receiving the consequences of your previous thinking and previous actions. Your circumstances might not reflect directly as to the changed thinking you have about your situation or whatever area of life you're changing your thinking about. So there can be some disconnect between immediately where you're at and your circumstances, because your circumstances are the result of all your previous thinking and actions, which you could now start changing. So it might be a little misaligned. But the reality of it is, if you look at your circumstances, you can tell pretty distinctly what you used to think about, the actions you used to take. Now, if you've changed them, yeah, you'll know because things will change in a positive way going forward. If you haven't changed them, you'll get the same. If you haven't changed them, nothing will change. What's the saying? Nothing changes if nothing changes. Well, that's the truth. You keep thinking the same way and acting the same way, you're going to attract the same people into your life. You're going to end up in the same jobs, in the same situations, doing the same things, getting in the same trouble with the same emotional pain every time. Because you haven't changed. You're still the same guy, still the same girl. So, all right, let's go on ahead here. Well, they are indispensable to his development. Our circumstances are indispensable to our development, right? This is because that's where we learn from. That's where we actually get the red flags, as they call them, to say, hey, we have to change something. Hey, we have to do something different, right? So your circumstances are crucial to actually showing you the path you need to be taking, and they will continue to be, right? Whether it's positive or negative, your circumstances are going to show what you have to do going forward. So the next paragraph I'm going to kind of give a look at for you is that as a progressive, evolving being, man is where he is, that he may learn and he may grow. That's why we have the same repeated experiences over and over again too, right? Because it's showing something, a pattern you have, a thought process that you have that needs to change. And as he learns the spiritual lesson, because the spiritual lesson is the alignment with right thinking, which is the virtuous thinking, which is Christ-like thinking, God-like thinking, God-like character, however you want to phrase that, righteousness, virtuous. The pain and the suffering caused by our circumstances are the things that align us correctly, the things that bump us back into the direction that we're supposed to be going, and that is the path to right living. That narrowing path that I talk about, living spiritually in service to whatever that might be. That might be a deity, like I said, or nature, or God, the universe, society. As long as it's not you, you're going to be all right. So it's pretty incredible when you see that, because when you can take that lesson and take that understanding as truth, right? As you take that and you take that as truth, as a true belief, then your circumstances are much more of an encouraging thing to be a part of. Why? Because you get to learn from them, even if they're not good circumstances, right? Positive ones, yeah, that means you're doing the right things. Reinforce it, continue to grow with it. Negative ones, the ones that hurt, ones that cause those emotions that are a little bit more painful than we'd like to have, well, you get to learn from them, grow with them, change, And when you take that perspective and then you take the previous thing I talked about of everything matters, you can change a lot very quickly and start seeing the benefits very fast too. It can happen quicker than you realize. It says here, when a man earnestly applies himself to remedy the defects in his character and makes swift and marked progress, he passes rapidly through a succession of vicissitudes, right? Which means it changes quickly, really. So the more thoroughly and completely you apply this and practice these understandings and this principle, the quicker your life will change. And the quicker these changes will come on. So the beginning of the next paragraph is quite important and is a statement that I really needed to take and hold on to within me, because it was a painful truth to take in. Because, well, I'll just read it first. The soul attracts that which it secretly harbors, that which it loves, also that which it fears. It reaches the height of its cherished aspirations. It falls to the level of its unchastened desires. And circumstances are the means by which the soul receives its own. So, why that's a hard thing to understand is if you have some painful circumstances in your life, if you have repeated painful circumstances in your life that you find yourself in regularly, you have to take a look and see if that's what you're holding on to. Now, that doesn't mean you like, let's say if it's a painful situation, abusive relationship, something of that nature, that doesn't mean you like the pain necessarily. But it does mean you're holding on to some fear in your heart that keeps bringing this situation to you, that keeps putting you in these circumstances that you don't want to be in anymore. Your circumstances will show what you're attracting to yourself. And those things you attract to yourself are through your thoughts and your actions. Because your actions will display whether you want them to or not, whether you think you're hiding it or not, or you think you've buried it far enough down, deep enough. They will show. It will come through in some way, in some form. I promise you they will. So if you've got some things in your life that are repeatedly showing up, there's something in you that's bringing that to you consistently throughout your actions. And that was hard. As hard as it was, though, to accept that, there was power in it too. There was strength in that understanding. There's something in me that's reaching out and bringing this to me. When I could understand that, when I could see that, when I believed it, I was able to start changing those things. But I had to take that as truth. I had to take that as truth. Everything in our life is for us to learn from, especially the repeated situations that we find ourselves in. And I know it's not a fun thing to say, but it's been my truth. It's been what's given me the ability to walk freely today from some pretty nasty habits and some pretty hard situations. So, it's been my experience, and I fully believe it. A couple paragraphs below that, though, we talk about following the inmost desires, aspiration, thoughts by which he allows himself to be dominated, a man at last arrives at the fruition and fulfillment in their outer conditions of his life. And there's some parentheses in there, pursuing the will-o-wisps of impure imaginings or steadfastly walking the highway of strong and high endeavor. So, if in your soul, if in your mind you are only out to serve yourself, selfishly, you're selfish, you're self-centered, that's the only thing that you care about, that will show. If you take interest in doing the right thing for the right reason instead, and being of service to whatever that power greater than yourself is, things will change significantly. So, there's a couple paragraphs where he talks about how You don't end up in jail by accident. You don't end up in the almshouse by accident, and people don't end up in these great positions by accident either. But a person can be outwardly trying to exhibit good behaviors and good actions, but inwardly having these negative thoughts, these selfish, self-centered thoughts, these thoughts of these desires to have something that they have not yet justly earned, right? It says, nor does a pure-minded man fall suddenly into crime by stress of an external force. Criminal thought has long been secretly fostered in his heart, and the hour of opportunity revealed its gathered power. So if you're having thoughts that are really selfish, they're self-serving, they're things that are really not healthy thoughts, you have to address those. You have to acknowledge them and change them. Suppressing them or just in the wee hours of nights, selfishly entertaining them, whatever it might be. It's just letting them grow in strength and power until the day comes where they can show up and you do it. And it happens. The thought was always there. You don't just suddenly commit a crime. It's not how it goes. It wasn't my experience. I love the way this is worded. He revisits the concept regularly, and this is one of, I think, my favorite wording of it in this chapter. Circumstance does not make the man, it reveals him to themselves. How many people think that they're the victim of their own circumstances? They're the victim of their own upbringing, of their genetics, of this or that. Those can have a part initially in the creation of you as your body's maturing and your mind's maturing and your soul is maturing. But when do you take full responsibility and accountability for who you are? Circumstance does not make the man. It reveals him to himself. So if you're constantly pointing fingers, if you're constantly in a place to say, oh, it's not my fault, it's 100% your fault because you're aware of it and you haven't done anything about it. That's not necessarily the most favored or highly looked upon perspective these days, and I know that. But it's true. It's absolutely true. If you're willing to put the work in and change how you think, you can. I truly believe that for every single person. Every single person that has a desire to change can change. But if you want to stay the victim and you want to stay having and performing these actions and behaviors because they serve you in some way, because they make you feel good, they make you feel powerful, they make you have this selfish fantasy become fulfilled, whatever it is, that's on you. Your thoughts and your character are revealed through your circumstances. And you can change those by changing who you're around, what you think about, what you put into your body, what spiritual information you're taking in. Everything you choose to be around and take into yourself will bring you closer to a spiritual way of living or a selfish way of living. Service to yourself or service to God, your deity, that power greater than yourself, whatever that may be. What are you going to do? What is it? Where are you going to go? All right. Man is the maker of himself and the shaper and author of his environment. The soul comes to its own, and through every step of its earthly pilgrimage, it attracts those combinations of conditions which reveal itself. which are the reflections of its own purity and impurity, its strength and its weaknesses. So just an expansion on that. It's all of your strengths and weaknesses will be displayed to you in your environment. You just got to look. You just got to look. That's the funniest thing to me. I'm a sober individual. I'm in recovery, and it's amazing to me how many people, if they just opened their eyes and looked around and looked at their own circumstances, how much they could learn, how much they could grow. But they're blinded to it. Like I was blinded to it. Let's be honest. I'm no better. I've just had enough pain that my eyes got forced open. That's all. I can see now what I've done to myself. I can see now how changing and taking these actions that we're talking about here have changed my circumstances. That's why I truly believe in this. That's why I based so much of my life around old spiritual teachings, this book included, and a lot of James Allen's stuff included. These are spiritual laws that have been around forever, but people just don't have the willingness to see it yet. Now, this next one, we've kind of talked on it, but it's another perspective of the same thing. The men do not attract that which they want, but that which they are. Their whims, fancies, and ambitions are thwarted at every step, but their inmost thoughts and desires fed with their own food, be it foul or clean. Let that sink in. It sucks. This one kind of sucks. You could have the best of intentions, but if all you think about is selfish things, you'll never get there. Never. You might want to save money, but you won't change your spending habits. You think it's because you don't make enough money at your job. No, do a budget. Take some basic actions to correct this. These are the things that we get discouraged with because, honestly, these are things that I used as ammunition to say there was no deity, no God, or any concept of God, right? It was because, I really wanted this to happen. I really was trying to help this person. I was always doing it for selfish reasons. I wanted that validation. I wanted someone to say good job to me. I wanted somebody to give me this sense of comfort and ease. So I was doing it for selfish reasons. And when it backfired, which of course it did, it was my own fault. Then I get angry. I get resentful. I think the world's unfair. When in reality, it all boils down to me every time as being the problem. So I can have these thoughts and ideas, these whims, I think he calls them, and these grandiose hopes. But if I'm not willing to change my heart and my mind and what I feed myself and do the work necessary to allow these things to come into fruition in reality, then I'm thwarting myself. I think that's the word he used earlier. I'm constantly getting in my own way, is how they say in the recovery community. I'm my biggest problem. I stand in my way all the time. A line in a couple sentences down. Only himself manacles man. Thought and action are gallowers of fate. They imprison being base. They are also angels of freedom. They liberate being noble. There's some big stuff. As there's in one of the 12-step programs, it talks about freedom from the bondage of self. And that's where so many people are. Whether you are an alcoholic or a drug addict or have other mental health things going on or life things going on, we usually have set ourselves up to be shackled by our own fears and insecurities. I love how he says this, our thoughts are the gallowers of fate. They set up our own prisons for us. We choose them. Isn't that amazing? We choose them. They set up our own prisons. Or they can be angels of freedom. Is that what he calls it? Angels of freedom. They liberate, being noble. If you start to feed yourself spiritual things and things to be of service and selfless, and change what you think about, change your thought patterns, suddenly they're the things that your thoughts will enable you to soar higher than you ever thought possible. It'll give you the opportunity to live a life beyond your wildest dreams. So it's quite amazing. And he goes on in this next paragraph to talk about fighting against circumstances. We'll put our heads down sometimes and we'll really start going after our circumstances. Like, if we fix that, we're going to feel okay, right? We like to put demands on our circumstances. We put demands on the world to say, make me feel whole, make me comfortable, make me content. And it does not work that way. Those are things that come from doing the inside work. And then you find it everywhere in the world. Anywhere else will limit you. Everywhere else will defeat you. If you're demanding the world to compensate for you, to work around you, you will lose. You will be uncomfortable, miserable, and scared the entirety of your life because your peace and your self-image are reliant upon external things that can be taken away. So when you're fighting against the circumstances, you're fighting against things you yourself have brought into your life, trying to make the world suit your needs. And then when it doesn't work, you're then you put the fight external to you, right? It says, in the light of this truth, what then is the meaning of fighting against circumstances? It means that a man is continually revolting against an effect without, while all the time he is nourishing and preserving the cause in his heart. That cause may take the form of conscious vice or unconscious weakness, but whatever it is stubborn. Whatever it is, it stubbornly retards the efforts of its possessor and thus calls aloud for remedy. There's some big red flags in your life that there's a problem, but you think those are the problem. The issue is coming from within. You've brought those into your life. Why did you do that? You have to take a look at this stuff, guys. And, well, I'm not here to tell you what to do, but I can tell you I had to. Maybe you can do it a different way. But the next line in that, men are anxious to improve their circumstances. I'm constantly looking outside of me. I want this to be better. I want this to be better, right? But are unwilling to improve themselves. They therefore remain bound. And I have here, you can't change circumstance without changing yourself. If you try these good intentions to change the world or change yourself without doing the internal work, I equate it to people that want to quit drinking. And they just want to stop drinking, put it down. They force an external change, which is where a lot of change starts with, right? We stop the external, we stop the behavior, but then we have to change the actions and the thinking and the intentions behind it, right? In that order. So it goes behavior, thinking, intentions. Serving yourself, you're serving others, then it goes into the thinking based on that, and then that thinking blossoms into actions, and those actions have consequences. That's the way this whole thing works, right? That's the way this whole thing works. But you can't force the outside change and not change in here and think that outside change is going to hold. It won't. It absolutely will not be a permanent change. It will only ever be temporary. Because every inch of your body and your soul is screaming to have it back. Whatever that negative thing is. It needs it. It's what it does. You have to change yourself first. And then that change of behavior will become permanent. That's what this spiritual way of living entails, guys. Time's flying by for me. And this is not just for one area of life. This isn't just with the people around you. This is something that affects every area of life, like I've talked about. This is your romantic relationships, your friendships, your co-working relationships, your relationships with your employer, the job you choose to take, where you spend your money, where you spend your time. This is an all life problem. This is an all life way of living, maybe is a better way to say it. This is a design for living, as some might say. It all matters. Remember that. It all matters. He gives an example of how a man wants to have more money, but he can't even show up to his current job and perform his duties to the best of his ability and utmost. He thinks he has the right to shirk his superiors, but you obviously don't have the right train of thinking to get a job that makes you more money. And then he goes on to a rich man who's the victim of a painful and persistent disease as the result of gluttony. Right? This could be diabetes. This could be just obesity. This could be a plethora of things, right? Neuropathy, anything, right? And he's willing to give large sums of money to get rid of it, but he will not sacrifice his gluttonous desires. You might want to do all these healthy things. You might want to have these changes in your life, but this is the reality. You're not willing to do the work to change it. You're not. You want to still be selfish and self-centered and not have the consequences. But that's not how this works. That's not how this works. We constantly are putting ourselves in this situation because we want what we want. We have this way of thinking. We think about these things and we have these behaviors and we get these consequences, right? But we're not willing to change them because they serve us. They make us feel good. They make us feel powerful. They make us feel strong. I mean, sometimes things make us feel powerless, and we'll enjoy that too. I'm a sick person sometimes, or at least I used to be. So I could feel, I could look forward to feeling miserable. I could look forward to feeling like a failure because it let me feel like I didn't have to accept responsibility for things. So we constantly are derailing ourselves. This line here. Excuse me. Sorry about that, guys. He is continually frustrating its accomplishment by encouraging thoughts and desires which cannot possibly harmonize with that end. Yeah, we've all seen someone like this, someone doing stuff where you look at them and go, you want this outcome. I think I used it a little bit earlier. You want to save money, but you're not willing to change your spending habits. There's no way you're going to. You're not willing to change the thing that's causing the problem. You're not willing to change your thoughts about that. You're not willing to give this up. Right? And then we play the victim to it. But the reality is, we're not. What this takes is sacrifice, guys. This takes sacrifice of the immediate gratification we get from a behavior and a way of thinking. And we have to have a little bit of faith that if we do it differently when we think differently, it will be better. It takes doing something different to get a different result. right. Where do I jump to next? This chapter's so large I can't do every single paragraph, which is kind of a sad thing. Every single paragraph in this is incredible, to be honest with you. So let me see. What did I have written down next? A man only. This is a couple pages later. I'm not sure if you're following along in a book, how far down it is, but it says suffering is always the effect of wrong thought in some direction. It is an indication that the individual is out of harmony with himself, with the law of his being. The sole and supreme use of suffering is to purify, to burn out all that is useless and impure. Suffering ceases for him who is impure. There could be no object in burning gold after the dross had been removed, and a perfectly pure and enlightened being could not suffer. This is giving purpose. This was actually something that I was happy to find out because I felt like my whole life was suffering when I finally got sober. Why did everything hurt? Right? Well, there was a lot of lessons I had to learn. When I could take suffering as a pathway to peace, when I could take suffering as an indicator and a flag that I needed to do something different, I became much more willing to change that. I became much more willing to take a look at it and say, what do I need to do differently now? Thank God for that. So to find out suffering isn't a permanent state of being, it lasts only as long as I'm willing to suffering only lasts as long as I am not willing to change. I change, the suffering goes away. My mental anguish disappears. My physical ailments start to clear up. My relationship starts getting better. It's amazing. But I thought I was just in a permanent state of suffering because I was the victim of the world. We talk about that a lot. Let me see. This is a process of self-discovery. And when we're talking about this through our circumstances, it's a lot of pain, it's a lot of uncomfortability to actually look at. And I know this, but I can tell you this. Your life will start to change as soon as you actually start being willing to do this work. I can promise you that. We talk about here. Man has but to right himself to find the universe is right. It's an amazing thing for me. When I finally started doing this work, I realized it wasn't the universe that needed to change, it was me. And then suddenly I didn't need the universe to change to serve me anymore. And when I stopped having to do that, my life started to change, and the universe, it was interesting because as soon as I stopped demanding that it serve me, the universe it felt like working much more willingly for me. Things started coming to me and my luck seemed to change. And which is kind of mind-blowing. So, and during the process of putting himself right, he will find that as he alters his thoughts towards things and other people will alter towards him. There we go. It's reciprocated in our interactions. When I stop being so selfish, so self-serving, suddenly everything starts getting better. Absolutely everything. When I start to actually have thoughts of selflessness and service to other people and doing the right thing for the right reason because it's the right thing to do, suddenly my interactions with people get better too. Other people will alter towards me, have altered towards me, because I'm not trying to get something out of them, even unconsciously doing it. I would do that all the time. I was a validation and pleasure-seeking individual, and I didn't even know it. So when I started to actually take a look at why things hurt, I was able to start changing my life. And then my relationships just got healthier. The proof of this truth is in every person, and it therefore admits of easy investigation by systemic introspection and self-analysis. Let a man radically alter his thoughts, and he will be astonished at the transformation it will effect in the material conditions of his life. Men imagine that thought can be kept secret, but it cannot. It rapidly crystallizes into habit, and habit solidifies into circumstances. And that's the summation of the whole thing. And now, this, towards the end of this, the last thing in this chapter is a poem, but we have some indicators here, right? I'm going to read them all again. And think of this as a check for your life. Think of it as a way to give you some guidance, because he's giving us he gives us a type of thinking, and then actions it turns into, and then circumstances it crystallizes into, right? So listen for some circumstances that you might have. We start with the negative, then we go into the positive. So listen for the circumstances, and then take a look at what the thoughts were that were associated with that. Run them down. Bestial thoughts crystallize into habits of drunkenness and sensuality, which solidify into circumstances of destitution and disease. Yes, that is true. Impure thoughts of every kind crystallize into enervating and confusing habits, which solidify into distracting and adverse circumstances. Thoughts of fear, doubt, and indecision crystallize into weak, unmanly, and irresolute habits, which solidify into circumstances of failure, indignance, and slavish dependence, this need on other things and other people. Lazy thoughts crystallize into habits of uncleanliness and dishonesty, which solidify into circumstances of foulness and beggary. Regularly happens. Hateful and condemnatory thoughts crystallize into habits of accusation and violence, which solidify into circumstances of injury and persecution. Selfish thoughts of all kinds crystallize into habits of self-seeking, which solidify into circumstances more or less distressing. I can tell you from personal experience of every single one of those that it's true. Those are direct. All those types of thoughts are directly linked to those circumstances. But we have the good as well. Beautiful thoughts of all kinds crystallize into habits of grace and kindliness, which solidify into genial and sunny circumstances. Pure thoughts crystallize into habits of temperance and self-control, which solidify into circumstances of repose and peace. Thoughts of courage, self-reliance, and decision crystallize into manly habits, which solidify into circumstances of success, plenty, and freedom. Energetic thoughts crystallize into habits of cleanliness and industry, which solidify into circumstances of pleasantness. Gentle and forgiving thoughts crystallize into habits of gentleness, which solidify into protective and preservative circumstances. Loving and unselfish thoughts crystallize into habits of self-forgetfulness for others, which solidify into circumstances of sure and abiding prosperity and true riches. So listen, if you heard something kind of stuck out to you, rewind it, play it again, see if you can find any thoughts that he's talking about that might relate. Helped me, continues to help me actually. Now I'm going to read this whole paragraph here. A particular train of thought persisted in, be it good or bad, cannot fail to produce its results on the character and circumstances. A man cannot directly choose his circumstances, but he can choose his thoughts. And so indirectly, yet surely, shape his circumstances. Whatever you're thinking about, good or bad, will shape your actions, which will shape your circumstances. That is a law of the universe, a spiritual law, you want to call it. Spiritual law of cause and effect, maybe, I think is what it's referred to in other places. Even by James Allen, actually. That is a law that will occur regardless of what it gets fed. Selfishness, self-centeredness, you'll get this. Selflessness and service, you'll get that. Cause and effect. It's as simple as that, really, at the end of the day. And just remember, you're the only one standing in your way. You are the only one that has to be willing for it to change. That's it. I promise you, that's it. Now, it ends with this poem that I'm going to end this with. Looks like we're going to go right to the hour mark, guys. Sorry. And I'll summarize it afterwards. So you will be what you will to be. Let failure find its false content in that poor word environment, but spirit scorns it, and it's free. I'll actually do it paragraph by paragraph. So you will be what you will to be. You will be what you're putting energy and thought into, right? It's not your environment. Don't blame environment for your failure. And when you stop doing that, there's freedom. It masters time and conquers space. It cows that boastful trickster chance and bids the tyrant circumstance uncrown and fill a servant's place. So it's saying when you take this way, when you properly apply your will to changing your thinking about things, you don't have to rely on chance anymore or circumstance. You're not reliant on these external things. You're reliant on changing your thinking to align with a more righteous, virtuous, spiritual way of living. And you shape your circumstances. You create your luck in a way, right? You get out of the way. You let life become more full. This is a poem that's been used a couple of times before, in songs and things too. The human will, that force unseen, the offspring of a deathless soul, can hew a way to any goal, though walls of granite intervene. We can change anything, regardless of what's standing in the way, regardless of what blocks come up. The human will, the force unseen, the offspring of a deathless soul, can hew a way to any goal through walls of granite, though walls of granite intervene. You have more power than you realize. Oh, it sounds corny. It sounded corny to me at first too. Now this last stanzas, I love this. Be not impatient in delays, but wait as one who understands. When spirit rises and commands, the gods are ready to obey. Now, why I love that? It's saying, recognize this now, quickly. Start doing this work quickly. But because when you understand, when your spirit rises and commands and changes, the gods are ready to obey. And it's gods lowercase, meaning earthly gods, meaning those things that we're worshiping or dependent upon externally to ourselves, and what some might call false idols, false gods. they're ready to obey us then. This isn't in like some tyrant, all-powerful being type of sense, but in a, you need nothing from them. So you do not serve them anymore. You do not serve these false gods, these gods of validation and greed and lust and selfishness and self-centeredness. You no longer need them. And in fact, it's the power gets swapped back to you. You walk uprightly and with confidence, and the whole world's different. So, all right. Well, there we are. That's the end for chapter 2. Beautiful, beautiful chapter there. Lots in there. I pulled out a lot of the relevant information, but I really, excuse me, sorry, I think my phone was streaming through my phone. Sorry, guys. I would encourage anybody to get this book and read it, tear it apart, mark it up like I do. You know, that's how this goes, okay? Everything. There's so much to be learned from this, and I hope I do it justice with these overviews, but I am looking forward to doing the reading next week, going into the 3rd chapter, which I think is Thought on Body, Health and Body. I think it's what it's called. Hold on, let me check for you. It is The Effect of Thought on Health and Body. And we'll read that next week. It should be a little bit shorter reading, of course, and we'll go from there. So I'm looking forward to it. Thank you, everybody, for your support on this channel. Go ahead and check out our Facebook page and enjoy the rest of your weekend. And I appreciate it. So until next time, thanks.